Morning. Thank you very much for being here.
Fare presentazioni, no?
No, we need no presentation.
Moltissimo
Vabbè.
il Presidente. Ha sottolineato l'importanza di Erasmus per creare una generazione di europei, per contribuire a creare fino in fondo una generazione di europei. Rivolgeranno alcune domande e saranno ben contenti delle risposte che ci vorrai dare, una parte delle quali le abbiamo sentite ben espresse, con toni anche coinvolgenti, commoventi nella tua Lectio Magistralis. Chi chiede la parola? Magari chi chiede si presenta e dice da quale università viene, con nome e cognome. Prego.
Hello, Mr. President. I'm Emanuele Carmi from the Erasmus Student Network Italia. I'm the education officer. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much for this meeting because it gives us the energy we need to proceed with our volunteering. And my question is the following. It seems that the Erasmus generation remains one of the few true supporters of the European Union and the concept of the European citizenship. What, in your opinion, can this generation do to help Europe regain confidence in itself? Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for Ich glaube, das funktioniert hier. Super. Vielen Dank. Yeah, thank you very much for our meeting. First of all, I want to start to thank you for your interest meeting me. Secondly, I refused to meet you for half an hour because this is not enough. Therefore, I asked to stay longer with you because my experience is that in public programs, it's only foreseen half an hour, and this is not meaningful. It's nonsense. So the answer to your question is quite easy. The silent majority is supporting the idea of Europe. And it is therefore necessary once more to define very briefly what is the idea on which Europe was founded, created. This is the idea that countries and nations across borders cooperate. And when I'm speaking across borders, I speak not about physical borders between Italy and Austria and this to close the Brenner or whatever. So, jetzt bin ich aber jetzt. Aha. Okay. So it is about cultural borders, linguistic borders, economic borders, religious borders, that countries and nations across borders cooperate in common institutions. That was the idea, instead to run against each other, to fight each other. And the overwhelming majority of citizens, wherever I am in Europe and I discuss with them, tell me that's a good idea, go ahead. But our problem is a double one. First, there is an increasing number of citizens who don't identify that idea with the European Union because they think the European Union had nothing to do with that idea. And they are right. We have to bring the European Union in a shape, back in the shape, reflecting that idea, that on mutual respect and equal footing and equality, we work together. And secondly, if it is true that the silent majority is in favor, but there is a very loud minority creating the image that they are representing the majority, then the conclusion is that the silent majority should not keep silent. And the Erasmus generation, you, the best educated generation that this continent perhaps ever had, you must be outspoken, loud. And if there is a racist, you must have the courage to raise your voice and to say, shut up. And as long as I am here, you have not the right to speak in such a way. I know that this is very, very difficult, and therefore you should never be alone. You should always be with 3, 4 people together, and then to say, stop. No, we are against, and we are louder than you are. So this is short engagement, also public engagement.
Let's go ahead with the question, please. If you could tell us where you did your Erasmus or where you come from, that would be a good starting point.
I'm Valentina Presa, the Vice President of Erasmus Student Network Italy. I was Erasmus in Brussels. And Erasmus period is a unique experience that gives us specific skills. So we improve a foreign language, we live in a multicultural environment, we study or work in foreign countries, and also volunteering in our association, such as Erasmus Student Network, gives us the chance to develop many different skills. We learn to schedule our time, we work in teams, we organize events and manage projects. So how all these competencies and soft skills could be recognized in an official way? And are European institutions working on it? Would you say that it's a priority in the field of youth policies?
Absolutely, it's a priority. The mutual recognition of competences between the member states is key. We created a single market. We are logically also creating a single work market, work area. And therefore skills and certification must be not unique. This is impossible. Germany has a different system than Italy, and Italy is different from Spain or Sweden. But that member states who work in a common economic and monetary area together don't recognize the qualification of another country automatically makes no sense. A doctor educated, a medicine doctor educated in Siena, he knows also what a flu is in Hamburg. So I know this is a little bit simplification, but an engineer, airplane engineer who studied in Bologna, why he should not be recognized in Toulouse or in Hamburg with Airbus? And the other way around, why should a coal mining engineer or a steel production engineer of Duisburg not be recognized in Piombino? So I think this is in our own interest to make this mutual recognition and also the alignment of the contents of the universities more smooth and more effective. I just met the president of the twin university, of the sister university here of Siena, who told me that they are preparing a cooperation with the universities of Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, the Mediterranean countries, which is key. But if we as Europeans are unable to create our own homogeneity inside, how to cooperate then effectively with the other side? Therefore, I think to bring it in a line and mutual recognition is absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Let's go ahead. The next question.
It is not a technical university here, as I know.
Good morning, my name is Angela Gambioli and I'm a student of the University of Siena, but also a volunteer of the Erasmus Student Network. So during the period of the European pessimism of the 80s, and despite the determined opposition of Lady Thatcher, others to Europe, was born the idea of Erasmus. This idea eliminated de facto borders between the states, starting from the university and research. After 30 years, Europe, the continent where the walls were falling, now is the continent in which the walls start to rise again. I would like to ask about the big issues of inequality that still make mobility programs a niche opportunity and not yet a mass phenomenon. Even if the new Erasmus Plus program has a larger budget than in the past, to bring down the real walls and stereotypes, is there the need to invest even more in these fields, aware of the great value of social inclusion and disagree with the exclusivity of the benefit?
I could not agree more. You have already given the answer to your in the frame of your question. Yeah, we have to invest in education, in research, and in exchange. And I'm really an advocate for Erasmus Plus, also beside the university, the academic world. It is very important that the young academics are in that program of exchange, which is, in my eyes, one of the biggest success of European actions. But a young apprentice in Spain, why he should not go to an enterprise in Germany or the other way around? We should not limit it only to academics and students. And there is one other phenomenon we should not underestimate the drama behind. I'll tell you a story. During the election campaign in 2014, I have often told that story. My collaborators, they know it by heart because I tell it so often. I met in Madrid people like you, 30 young men and women selected because the President of the Parliament has not the right to choose his interlocutors himself. It's always selected, which is a problem, by the way. But I decided to invite 30 young men and women from these Indignados. And they were between 18 and 29 years old. And all unemployed. All. And there were a young woman, 26 years old, 2 academic certificates. She was architect and psychologist. And I said, this is a strange combination. Why you have chosen that combination? And she said, the architects know nothing about psychology, therefore they build houses where nobody can live in. I said, this is a strong argument. And she told me that she wants to leave from Spain with the argument, in Spain is no place for me, I go to Latin America. And I didn't tell her that the ambassador of the country she wanted to go to told me some weeks before that his country closed the borders for Europeans. We are the richest continent of the world, and young men and women from some of our countries want to leave to Latin America because they don't find a job here. This is the real drama. And if you look to the reality of our economic development, I'm not surprised that citizens are losing trust. We are living in a Europe where speculators make billions of profits and don't pay taxes. But when they make billions of losses, the taxpayers have to pay for them. People say, this is not my world. I'm absolutely, and if we would distribute the 1,000 billion euros, I repeat the figure, 1,000 billion euros every year escapes from fiscality of the member states of the European Union and by tax avoidance, tax fraud, tax evasion. If we would have only 10% and invest this, for example, in countries with a high unemployment rate of young people of Erasmus program, you have finalized your study and then you are unemployed. I would prefer that an enterprise who employs a young unemployed man or woman gets a privilege on the interest rates or on the tax. To combine the activity of a country in the frame of its national budget with a direct, active employment policy. So Erasmus has an enormous effect, but the effect of a good skill should lead to employment, or the skill is useless. And therefore, I think we should, in this regard, think more that the switch from university to the world of work must be more open, more effective, more smooth for students. Erasmus or not Erasmus?
Thank you. Next question, please.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Mattia Sibra, a student of the University of Pisa and also the president of the ESN Pisa. I would like to know your opinion about two things. Terror struck again recently at the very heart of Europe. The Schengen Agreement seems to be in danger due to these events. Some countries propose to build walls, while other far-right parties suggest to suspend the treaty, raising concern all across the continent about the freedom of movement that became one of the pillars of the European Union. In your opinion, is it likely that this fear could have an impact on the participation of young people in the Erasmus program? And how could the European Union prevent this from happening? And the second one is, right after the Brussels attacks, several European ministers and former ministers called for a European FBI in order to create a European intelligence structure that might overcome the issues and the fragmentation experienced by the national bodies while investigating on terrorism and improving the communication between member states. At the moment, Europol only coordinates with the national police without having a real direct action. What can we do to improve Europol's work in order to fight terrorism and to avoid a lower participation in the Erasmus program? Thank you and congratulations for your degree.
Thank you very much for the congratulations. You are German?
Sorry?
You are German?
No, I'm
Italian. Oh.
When did you do the Erasmus?
But the name sounded like a German name. No? So thank you very much for the congratulations. I'm not an academic. I never had. I didn't make my baccalaureate. What's that in English?
In English or in Italian?
In Italian.
Il diploma di maturità.
See, and I was never in a university. I was a bookseller. I made an apprentissage as a bookseller. And so I'm very proud to be now a doctor, honoris causa. And my two elder brothers, who are real doctors, I will now... the Schengen area will not be end with closed borders. This is nonsense. And these people who are telling us we have to close the borders because of terrorism, border controls to check in times of danger or high risks are in the Treaty of Schengen. This is foreseen. And if you cross a border and you look very carefully, you will see more or less at all borders internally the European Union police forces. If you, for example, in northern Italy, go to Austria or to Switzerland or to France, you see at the borders police forces on both sides. You can cross the border, but the police forces can stop you. This is even the case today, and therefore I found this always so blown up. This is show making. And also, if Austria now believes with closing, and the Austrian chancellor is a close friend of mine, to close the Brenner would prevent people who are fleeing from Daesh or from Mr. Assad's bomb, then they will find another way, but sooner or later they will arrive. Therefore, it would be better that all the member states of the European Union, instead to discuss internal border closures, should discuss about more effective external border control. And secondly, we are creating a homemade crisis on refugees. If you would distribute 1 million of refugees in 28 countries amongst 508 million Europeans, they disappear. But if 22 member states say we have nothing to do with it, and it is only a problem of Italy, Greece, Germany, Austria, or whomever, then for these countries it becomes a problem. The cynical moment that some of these governments who don't participate in the distribution and create via that non-participation a crisis, blame then the European Union for its ineffectiveness to manage the crisis, this is real cynical. Therefore, I'm not in favor of closing Schengen borders. I personally live beside a Schengen border. My city where I was mayor is just from my home, from my office at home, I look on the German-Belgium-Dutch border. I showed it to him yesterday. You can, when you look out of my window of my office at home, I see Belgium and the Netherlands. So it's nice. Therefore, I'm European. It's impossible to close these borders. By the way, also economically impossible. Our just-in-time production and distribution of goods depends from that the trucks can cross the borders. So external border control, and in case of risks, also internal border controls are possible. By the way, France and Belgium closed the border after the attacks in Paris. And the guys who did it escaped to Brussels. Secondly, Home Affairs ministers who I know was surprised about their question. Please identify that minister, Home Affairs minister, who said we need a European FBI. I don't know him, but I would really like to make his knowledge, because I know that members in the European Parliament asked for it, even national parliamentarians. And it was the ministers who were against. This vision, we need better European cooperation, yes, but under Italian rule, German rule, French rule, Finnish rule, Danish rule, Britain rule, Irish rule, Portuguese rule, Spanish rule. This patchwork fight against terrorism is the highest inefficient thing I know. They want to get all the data of everybody, and then they say, but there is no automatic exchange. Because, and if you ask them, why no automatic exchange? They have a long list of worries. I don't mention it publicly because I can't. I would prefer that I could mention it publicly, because I start to cry if I listen to such arguments. But okay, it's the case. We are failing because of national sovereignty arguments. And this is the message of these anti-Europeans. First the nation, then Europe. And these parties are winning. And if we enlarge this from security, where it happens ineffectively, to refugee crisis, where it happens ineffectively, to economic or monetary questions, then it becomes a real risk for all of us. Therefore, if the European Union will, by this priority of national thinking, fail with its internal market and common currency, like these people here in this regional party who is in the northern part of Italy, telling even Italy is too big, we should create this part of Italy as a sovereign country with a known currency, like Mr. Maroni in previous times told us. These people are playing with your future. And therefore, what we need is, in fight against terrorism, a European FBI. I don't know FBI. I would already be happy with a more and effective transnational cooperation and coordination via Europol.
Thank you. We still have 10 minutes. So next question.
Hello, I'm Lorenzo Amato from Università degli Studi Firenze. I've been Erasmus in Spain, in Granada, and now I'm the president of the Florence section of the Erasmus Student Network. Dear President, Umberto Eco, that you've mentioned before, some years ago, wrote, l'Erasmus ha dato vita alla prima generazione di giovani europei ed ha segnato una rivoluzione sessuale. Un giovane catalano incontra una ragazza fiamminga, i due si innamorano, si sposano e diventano europei, così come i loro figli. And he ends. L'Erasmus dovrebbe essere obbligatorio, e non solo per gli studenti, ma anche per i tassisti, gli idraulici e i lavoratori. Now, President, we are all students that lived the Erasmus experience and consider ourselves the first European generation, not only on paper, but also in values. Do you think that through another exchanging program centered on employers and workers, we could fight the Euroscepticism and in this way involve even previous generations?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm deeply convinced that your question is the right answer, except one thing. You are not the first European generation. The generation of my parents, these post-war Europeans who suffered partially 2 world wars, were the first European generation. I can tell you, really, I said it at the end of my speech. My father was born 1912. He died, became very old, and he died some years ago. And my mother was born 1920. My father was a child in the First World War, and he was a soldier in the Second World War. And they married 1940, the 30th of April. And I wrote some years ago an article about the photo, the wedding photo of my parents. There is a young woman in white and a man in a uniform, and they are not looking very happy. And once I asked my mother, why you are looking so sad? And my mother told me we married the 30th of April because he had to go to the war the 1st of May to France. And we married because the widows got a pension. That means my parents, on the day of their wedding, didn't think about children. They thought about what will happen when he will be killed. And after the Second World War, they got 5 children in a complete destroyed country. And they rebuilt that country. And I was the youngest one. And in 1971, I was sent with my school to an exchange to Bordeaux in France. And I came to a couple. The son of the couple was in that time in my family. I came to a couple, and the mother spoke really fluently German. And the father was very skeptical against us. Why? He was a resistant. And she was a translator and helped the resistance against the Germans. And then I learned for the first time what for a French couple of the same age like my parents, it meant when a young German came to their home. And when I got back from Bordeaux and I told to my parents, they received me like an own son. For my parents, the war was definitively over. And their conclusion was, yes, this is what we have to do for our children, because this is exactly the opposite what we suffered. And therefore, I think that generation was the first European generation. It is a pity that my generation, we are not so enthusiastic. My generation is not so enthusiastic about Europe because we think, yeah, okay, everything fine. The Europeans, peace. Like my football club guys, who I played football with. When I meet them, we are still a club of friends. We are Schulz. shut up with your peace and Europe and cooperation. We have it, and it's not necessary. You must not convince us every day. We have peace. We don't need the European Union. We have peace. And I said to my friend, you are stupid. We have peace because we have the European Union. And now you are running behind people who say, destroy the European Union. Do it, and then look what will happen. So this is a moral problem. Therefore, my hope is your generation. So the next one. You are nearer to my parents than my own generation. Thank you.
We take a couple more questions, maybe 3.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning again, Mr. President. My name is Sofia. I'm from Siena. I'm from this university. And even though you already answered to my question during your speech, and now as well, I would like to go straight to my intervention because it is extremely related to my experience abroad. As you know, nearly all European countries have been affected by terrorism, as we already said, in one form or another. So the attacks in Paris and those in Brussels on March 2016 showed the need for better cooperation in the fight against terrorism in Europe. Last year, I took part in the Erasmus project in Brussels, where I had the possibility to see the situation firsthand, directly with my eyes. So the question is, in the wake of these events, does the European Union have effective and concrete strategies or policies in order to step up collaboration between member states? That's the question.
I would be happy. I would be happy if I could answer yes. But we haven't a coherent strategy. This is one of our biggest problems. We need a coherent strategy, and therefore I'm very grateful for your question. And you saw in Brussels how difficult it is. One of the key elements of our strategy must be to fight against exclusion. We need an inclusive society. Inclusive society means and we have to avoid such terms because a lot of people don't understand what it means in inclusive society. Therefore, very practical. If your address decides about your future, this is already wrong because it is inequality. If your religion decides about your chances, it is already wrong. I think the overwhelming majority, this is my experience, by the way, in Brussels, of Muslim citizens, they are shocked because they even don't believe that other people, they are against these terrorists. I reminded the European Parliament some days ago in my speech for the victims that most of the victims of terrorism in the world are Muslims, because the most affected countries are Muslim countries. I had yesterday the visit of the president of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, who said clearly, I'm the president of the biggest Muslim democracy, and I'm prepared to cooperate with you against terrorism. We are suffering terrorism, but please stop to put all Muslim peoples under this general suspicious. This is dramatic. Therefore, we should stick to a principal value. Gender, religion, nationality, the skin, the color of your skin should not decide about your chances. This must be a result of a fair treatment and a fair and free access to our society. That's the key element. Therefore, I'm always, by the way, very grateful for such a lot of initiatives of young people, especially for openness and dialogue. I can only encourage all people to like you with your Erasmus program, Erasmus is a privilege, let's be honest. You are privileged. And if you want to do something, to give something back for that privilege, be engaged in such, in my eyes, the best political engagement of today is to act in society to create networks of openness. You must not become a parliamentarian or go to a political party or trade union or whatever. But if you, in your private life, with your friends, create an openness, then you have already answered sufficiently to what Erasmus is giving to you.
Thank you. Yes, let's go here. Let's take the question here.
Ja, guten Morgen, Herr Präsident. Gratulation nochmal und danke, dass Sie sich die Zeit nehmen.
Endlich mal einer, der ja Deutsch.
Finally, someone who speaks German. My name is Raphael. I'm doing my Erasmus here in Siena at the moment. I'm from Frankfurt, Germany. And I like what you said about criticizing Europe is not being against Europe. So if you could change something of the institutional setting of the system of Europe, of the EU, what would that be?
I would change the structure of the Council of Heads of States and Government. I have nothing to criticize if a prime minister, president, or chancellor defends the interest of its country. Therefore, they are elected. That Renzi, first of all, says I'm here as the prime minister of Italy, or Merkel, I'm the chancellor of Germany, or Hollande as the president of France. It's absolutely clear. That's their duty. But the previous generation of heads of states and government, they understood that to protect the own country in the 21st century, the best way is to strengthen Europe. If this defensive approach, I defend the interest of my country, means the interest of my country are attacked. You could also change the rhetoric by saying, I strengthen my country via transnational cooperation. I'm regaining lost sovereignty by strengthening shared sovereignty on a transnational level. Fight against terrorism is, for example. You give up the police competence partially on your own level. This is for sure less sovereignty, but you regain protection by a shared sovereignty in our globalized world. This is for the climate change, migration, taxation, fight against organized crime or terrorism, fights against human trafficking. And therefore, I would make an appeal to the heads of states and government who introduced the principle of unanimity by the backstage. In the council and the parliament, you decide with majority, the council of ministers in the parliament. The council of heads of states and government has the principle of unanimity. If the prime minister of Malta says stop, this is stop. And if Merkel says stop, it is stop. Or Renzi or whoever. Therefore, I would recommend to them not to draw even the details of lawmaking on their level, because then you have stagnation. To let the institutions do their job. I raised that in my speech. And secondly, to change this attitude to believe that traveling to Brussels means to go to a hostile place where I have to defend my interest. Instead, to go there and to say, I try to find a compromise with my colleague, which is perhaps not 100% what I want, but at the end, a fair deal strengthening everybody.
Thank you. We take the last two. So I think we had her down there first, and then.
Okay, this is the last three.
The last three, okay.
And I will be shorter than so, or he falls in a deep crisis.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also from Germany and doing my Erasmus here in Siena. And we're talking always about values of the European Union. And the European Union is a great institution to protect these values. For example, protection of human rights or evolving solidarity between nations and between people. And now we've all seen the pictures, for example, during the finance crisis, the politics towards Greece. Now the refugee crisis, what's happening in Idomeni, what's happening in the Middle Sea. And now there are plans in the European Union to negotiate with autocratic leaders from East Africa, for example, from the president of Sudan, who is searched by the International Tribunal in Den Haag. So my question is, how can people in Europe, but especially outside of Europe, still believe in the great institution of the European Union to protect those values if we see what's happening and what people or politicians do all the time?
It is a dramatic question you are raising. Oh, this is, yeah, it is. You are raising to one of my biggest problems. You're touching on one of my, not only my, everybody who shares that view, that we are a community of law, and that we are the place where the national countries and the transnational institutions are obliged to guarantee from a fundamental principle the individual rights and value, and to protect these values. How can we then deal with dictatorships? Therefore my answer is absolutely clear. This is the dilemma of everybody who is acting in international politics. My idol in my political life, in my generation, was the former German Chancellor Willy Brandt, who as a foreign affairs minister said, answering to a similar question, if I would only, as foreign affairs minister, deal with democracies, I could close the foreign affairs minister and stay at home, then my home, private home is big enough. The majority of nations, countries in Africa, in Asia, partially also in Latin America, are not democracies to compare with us. Secondly, what to do with those countries who are, not all of them are really to compare with Sudan or with Eritrea or other bloody dictatorships. North Korea, for example. China, highest degree of extrajudicial killings is China. But there is no way we must deal with them. So how to get out of the dilemma? And I want to tell you perhaps a story, an experience of my life as a parliamentarian. I was in my first mandate the coordinator of my parliamentarian group in the Human Rights Committee. I was later the vice chairman of that committee. And once I got an answer, I got a demand of an embassy of a dictatorship, I don't mention the name, where I was told the human rights responsible of the embassy of that dictatorship want to speak to me. And I said to my collaborator, they have a human rights responsible. I was very surprised. And it's a country with really a lot of, and then I said, no, I don't meet them. Because I thought, as a human rights defender, you can't meet with such people who torture, who kill, who don't respect fundamental rights. And then a former colleague who was a very wise man gave me a lesson for the rest of my life. He told me this is a mistake, what you are doing. I said, why? He said to me, if you want to save a victim, you must be hanged. You must speak to the hangman. If you want to do something for people who are tortured, you must speak to the government which is torturing. That was a lesson. Therefore, we have no alternative. We must discuss with them. If we then keep silent, or if we publicly say you are torturing, you are oppressing, if we depend, for example, in our European cooperation on the money level with conditionality, that we, for example, our development aid link to good governance and to respect of fundamental rights. This is the question we have to discuss about. So my answer very precisely is, we can't escape from them, from dealing with them, but we should not sacrifice our values in dealing with them. On which is concerning the refugee crisis, we have this dilemma every day. I have that dilemma every day. And I'm afraid, I know that people are of the opinion you should stop to cooperate with them. I'm against, because if we stop even to deal with them, we give up the fight against the trafficking, because at the end we push them, people and citizens, definitively in the hand of corrupt traffickers, which are, that should be made more known often in a direct contact with these governments.
That was kind of short, Martin, but there was a kind of short answer. But the next two we take. we
No,
take.
but I said at the beginning to your answer, you saw. I see in your eyes, and you see in my eyes. It is a dilemma, and I wanted to explain that dilemma, present my excuses, but from time to time, it's necessary to explain a little bit to be better understood.
We take the last two, but really
It's my dilemma that my collaborators don't understand.
So please, the very last two, but super quick, please.
Guten Tag, Herr Schulz. Mein Name ist Susan Wuldi, ich komme aus dem Iran und ich möchte für nächstes Semester in Deutschland Erasmus machen. Herr Schulz, ich habe mehr als 6 Jahre hinter den Toren von österreichischen und deutschen Botschaften Zeit verbracht, ohne Resultat. Meine Frage ist über Visaregeln. Würden Sie bitte Visaregeln für Iraner bzw. für Studenten und Touristen erleichtern? Wie Sie wissen, die Visaregel ist für Politiker und ihre Verwandten ganz leicht. Die Sanktionen sind nur gegen normale Menschen, besonders Studenten. Vielen Dank.
Ich wusste das gar nicht, dass das für Politiker leichter ist. Also kann sein. Ich kümmere mich drum. Ich denke, dass die Vereinbarungen, die wir jetzt mit dem Iran treffen, so umstritten sie sein mögen, insbesondere die ökonomische Kooperation mit dem Iran dazu führt, dass wir logischerweise auch über die Visaerleichterungen reden müssen. Aber einen Punkt haben Sie genannt, der mir wichtig ist. Ich war vor ein paar Wochen im Iran. Ich habe mit dem iranischen Staatspräsidenten darüber reden können. Ich glaube, dass der studentische Austausch, der akademische Austausch von zentraler Bedeutung ist. Also insofern gibt es da vielleicht Hoffnung.
Thank you. Very last question.
Short enough?
Good. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm French from the University of Rouen. A lot of young people do not believe anymore in Europe because they don't feel concerned, they don't feel represented. So I have two small questions. What do you say to these young people? And is Europe still democratic? Thank you.
Nothing. The first answer to the first question is nothing is granted for always. You mentioned in your laudatio Christopher Clark, The Sleepwalkers. I can only recommend everybody to read that book, how leaders believing war is impossible went like sleepwalkers in a disaster. From time to time, the behavior of some people reminds me a lot. So nothing is excluded. It's most unlikely that war, like we know it, will happen in Europe, but that the destruction of the European Union is possible with a lot of very negative, even confrontative effects between countries. Look to what happened during the financial crisis, because it was drawn on the highest level. When Angela Merkel and Alexis Tsipras disagreed about something, were not speaking about a disagreement between two leaders. They spoke Germany against Greece or Greece against Germany. This is already a first signal that this idea I just described at the early beginning in answering to your question, that Europe is an idea, that countries and nations across borders deepen what is unifying them instead to deepen what is separating them. That idea is still, in my eyes, a secular achievement, an epochal achievement, but it is in danger every day. It must be defended every day. There is this wonderful saying of an English philosopher who said, Edmund Burke, who said once, for the victory of evil, it is enough that the good ones do nothing. And therefore, that would be my answer to those students. And secondly, yes, Europe is democratic on the level of the member states for sure, but we have a democratic deficit in the institutions. That's the reason why I, as President of the European Parliament, against all rules of the treaties, I know that I'm often, with what I'm doing, not respecting limits of the treaty. I should be more respectful with the Council of Heads of States and Government, but I don't fall on the knees of a body I consider not at the most democratic, but they are all democratically legitimated, the heads of states and government. But what they are doing behind closed doors has to be legitimated and justified not only in their respective capitals, also by the European Parliament in Brussels. And every action of an executive body, like the Commission, must be under scrutiny of parliamentarians. Therefore, I think to make Europe more democratic, we have to strengthen every day the European Parliament.
Thank you very much, Martin. If you want, we have a little time to take a group picture, if you are interested and willing.
Okay.
And then we have 10 minutes for questions by the journalists. Yeah, come behind here, the podium, and
ragazzi, bisogna stringersi, quindi mettiamo il presidente. Presidente, si avvicina.